With the anniversary of the marathon bombings approaching, there's been a steady stream of tributes to the victims. Today, the Boston Public Library unveiled an exhibit of the mementos left at a makeshift memorial in Copley Square. And yet, as WGBH News reporter Adam Riley tells us, there's still no solid plan for a lasting monument to those killed and wounded nearly 1 year ago.
They spent the past few months in the city archives, shielded from Boston's brutal winter. But now these mementos left by well-wishers after the Boston Marathon bombings are back in the public eye. They're part of a new exhibit at the Boston Public Library. It's titled Dear Boston, and Mayor Marty Walsh says it serves an important purpose.
What we see here is a tribute to how, as a community, we have come through these tragedies.
At today's opening, Walsh described the exhibit as a crucial part of Boston's healing process.
Seeing them appear preserved in such a beautiful form, we receive their healing powers all over again.
But while Dear Boston may be powerful, it's only temporary. The exhibit ends on May 11th. The question now is whether there's going to be a permanent marathon bombing memorial, one that people can visit any month of any year, and if so, what shape it's going to take. One option would be building something here at the marathon finish line, where there's currently little trace, if any, of last year's trauma. But Tom Derderian has another idea. He's the president of USA Track and Field New England and wants to commemorate the bombings with a footbridge in Allston.
It would arch high over the Mass Pike and the railway.
There's no obvious reason a memorial should go here, at least until Derderian starts to make his case.
This is a gateway, so people coming to Boston for the marathon have to pass under this, almost all of them. The buses taking the runners out to the start pass under this.
Derderian isn't the only citizen championing a proposal. New Bedford artist Keith Francis has designed a 10-foot sculpture titled Perseverance that he'd like to place in Copley Square. Then again, when it comes to commemorating the bombings, the focus could be virtual.
I just took one look down and I said, I can't leave this girl here.
That's a recollection from Boston firefighter Jimmy Plord, posted at Our Marathon, an online archive that's gathered nearly 3,000 submissions. For its part, the city has also placed photos of the items left at Copley Square online. But Derderian thinks Boston needs something tangible.
A big, lasting, useful, physical thing. Point to the past and point to the future and say, we remember.
For now, it's not clear when or how the final decision will be made. That's bad news for anyone who wants a memorial built quickly, but good news if you've got an idea of your own. Last year, Mayor Tom Menino did announce the formation of what he called a remembrance committee, but it's not clear at this point what the status of that committee is and even whether it still exists. I think in part some of this ambiguity is because we're just a year out. The victims have been focused on recovering over the past year. There has been a change in mayoral administrations. So I think after the 1 year mark, we're going to see a discussion of what memorial there will be intensified.
I actually really like Tom Derderian's idea for all the ideas he expressed. But, is it really conceivable that they would put it outside of Boston?
It seemed totally counterintuitive to me at first. But on the other hand, when you think about Copley Square, it doesn't really lend itself to quiet reflection. And you can also imagine a memorial built there becoming in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years sort of a hangout for people who are just kicking around Copley Square, people sitting on it, disrespecting it, even vandalizing it, which is unfortunately something to worry about.
All right, Adam Riley, thank you for that. Well, my next guest helped organize the new exhibit at the library. Dan Yeager is the executive director of the New England Museum Association. Welcome to Greater Boston, or I should say welcome back, Dan.
Thank you, Emma.
So I was down there this morning briefly and saw the exhibit, and I kept thinking, wow, what a monumental task, because there were hundreds of thousands of items. Now, some of it, I'm sure, were thrown away, like the flowers, and some of the stuff got totally soaked by rain. But how did you sort through this, and how did you decide what you were going to actually put on display?
Well, not an easy process, needless to say. We had a big team of different folks, curators and conservators and the like, archivists that were actually looking at those materials that eventually wound their way to the Boston City Archives, is where they were stored. We had to fumigate them, conserve a lot of them, so just that was the preliminary triage. But then selecting for the exhibit was not easy. There were literally thousands of items, and you can't display everything. And I think that the biggest thing is the event curators really mapped out a very successful organization of the exhibit based on a number of different themes, messages from people from Bostonians to Boston, messages from people from other countries, messages from runners, of course, the runners being the centerpiece with the shoes and a lot of the clothing and the like, and on and on. And I think that put together, the idea of having it really focus on the messages to Boston and that feeling of we're with you, we have solidarity is a very moving thing, because if it got much beyond that, I think it would really lose its impact quite a bit. And
of course, a lot of them were from children. But I mean, I was struck by how organic the makeshift memorial was last year, and there's nothing you can really do about it because you got to preserve it. But there it is under glass, and even that sneaker pile was so neat. You know,
right,
I thought, I don't know, I think I might have thrown together a big pile of sneakers there.
Well, it's a little counterintuitive, I'm sure, because it is, as you point out, a very organic kind of a thing, in the sense that people literally are placing these items in Copley Square. But I've mentioned it before, once they place it in that particular spot, they become somewhat sacred objects in a sense. They are intentionally put there, they have some meaning behind it. And what I love about the exhibit is that we captured really that sense of people communicating with people, not just curators communicating with the general public. You really do get a sense that even though the sneakers are arranged and so forth in a particular manner, you look at the messages. They have a lot of impact that ultimately individuals are offering the city of Boston a lot of support.
All right, I want to bring Ruth Graham into the discussion. She's a regular contributor to the Boston Globe's Ideas section and wrote back in May about the instinct to preserve the makeshift memorial in Copley Square. Boston is going to have to consider, as you wrote too, about what kind, what type, where, as Adam reported in his piece, about a permanent structure. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it seems inevitable to me that there will be some kind of permanent memorial, whether it's a bridge, as we saw in the segment. I'm not sure how feasible that is or how likely it is. My understanding is the city has already planned some other kind of replacement for that bridge in Alston. I mean, the exhibit to me is this perfect kind of transition to starting to think about that, because it's starting to sort of curate and sift through and give some shape and definition to the temporary spontaneous memorial in Copley Square, which is, it was chaotic and it was emotional and meaningful, but now a year has passed and we're starting to sort of go through this process of considering it as a city where we go from here. So it could be something small in Copley Square itself, it could be something larger somewhere else, and that'll be something that it's a conversation we have to have as a city.
Well, as you know, Ruth, I mean, these things can get very contentious, as we've seen in the September 11th memorial in New York City. There is no permanent memorial, and you know, whose opinion do you get? How do you weigh in? And at some point, it's just got to be a city decision. But those considerations are all factors.
Well, and you see with the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, which is just getting ready to open now, but that's been more than 10 years. So you do see how long these conversations are, and a great deal of contention throughout that process, with a lot of different parties to consider. So victims, the city, there's a tremendous amount of parties who have an investment.
In the meantime, the Boston Public Library's exhibits only open for a month. I mean, might you consider extending that, or is that just one of those things, well, this is the finite
I think
space
we'd have to ask the library that, really, based on demand. And, you know, fortunately, they're under renovations, and that's why the gallery was available to us in the first place, which is terrific. It's a great location for it, of course, the spot that it should be, because it's so proximate and so involved in the sense of place for it. But yeah, we'll cross that.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe we should have something at the library that's just small, but it's inside, so it wouldn't, as Adam said, attract vandals or just sitting around, because there is a lot of that in Copley Square, skateboarding and all that kind of stuff. All right, Dan Yeager, thank you so much for coming again, and Ruth Graham.
Thanks.
Appreciate your coming.
Thank you, Emily.